Greetings, biology students. Up until now, we've been talking about moving molecules from high concentration to low concentration. And we can certainly think about that in terms of oxygen, carbon dioxide, and especially water. And I'm hoping that those terms stuck with you, especially hypertonic, hypotonic, and isotonic. But there are some other molecules, usually large molecules or ions. If you forgot what an ion is just a charged element. So something like potassium with a positive charge or chlorine with a negative charge. Um, those molecules often need to be pumped into the cell against their concentration gradient. And all that means is they get pumped from an area of low concentration to an area of high concentration. For those of you who liked my explanation using perfume in a perfume bottle, it's the equivalent of taking the perfume that's out of the bottle and shoving it back into the bottle. So when we do something like this, we need cellular energy, and that energy is going to be in the form of ATP. The way that I like to think about active transport is to think of it as a water pump. If you're going to pump water from one place to another, I always think about the water pump or the sump pump that I have in my basement, where it pumps water out of my basement and into my backyard. You need energy to do that. The energy that we use for a water pump is electricity, but the energy that your cells are going to use is going to be ATP. So what is active transport? It's the pumping of molecules from low concentration to high concentration. And the key piece of information that goes with that is that the cell needs energy in order to do that. It does not need energy for diffusion, but it does need energy for active transport. If you don't want to read all this, that's okay, because the picture here can do a lot of explaining for you for visual learners. One example, and this is just one example of active transport, is something called the sodium-potassium pump. The sodium-potassium pump, it takes molecules and it pumps them against their concentration gradient. So as you can see, the potassium is the green little sphere and sodium is the yellow sphere. And so what the pump does is it takes these molecules and it pumps them. It pumps the potassium from the left side of your screen to the right side of your screen. And it takes the sodium and pumps it from the right side of your screen to the left side of your screen. If you look at those spheres, you can see that they're going from low concentration to high concentration. That is, the green is going from an area where there's very few green spheres to an area where there's lots of green spheres. And the yellow is going from an area where there's very few yellow spheres to an area where there's high yellow spheres. This is super important to have these types of pumps in your cells. Why, specifically for sodium and potassium, is because they are charged. They actually generate an electrical current. For those of you who are interested in the human body, some of you might know that our nervous system is nothing more than just a series of electrical currents that get moved throughout our body. This is how it works. It is the sodium-potassium pump that pumps these ions in and out of the cell and creates an electrical current in your cell, and that allows our nerve cells to transmit electrical impulses. You don't see it here. Oh, yes, you do see it here, as a matter of fact. But ATP has to be used in order for this pump to work. So you can see that if you don't have ATP in your body, your nervous system would break down, and there would be big problems after that. But this is a classic example of active transport. The sodium-potassium pump, then, is a membrane pump that pumps molecules against their concentration gradient. Specifically, it pumps sodium and potassium against their concentration gradients, and ATP is used in order to do that. Just to go back 1 second to this pump, this is only one type of membrane pump that we have in our cell membranes. We have lots of different membrane pumps that pump different ions in and out of the cell. The sodium-potassium pump is one of the more important ones because we see it in our nervous system. Finally, there's another way in which we can get large molecules in and out of our cells. And the way that we can do this is by a process called endocytosis, where we take a molecule into the cell. So you can think endo coming in, and exocytosis, in which we can have a molecule leave the cell. Okay. And a great example of this are white blood cells. Hopefully this is happening for Mr. Dell right now, that the white blood cells are engulfing the virus that's in my body and it's going to kill it. What you see over here is essentially a white blood cell that is surrounding a bacteria, engulfing it and pulling it in. It's almost like a Pac-Man, if you will, going around the bacteria, surrounding it, and then pinching it off and bringing it into the cell. That's endocytosis. In order for the cell membrane to move like that, we need ATP. The exact opposite would be exocytosis. If you look at exocytosis down here, this is the end of a neuron, and you can see these little vesicles. Instead of carrying proteins, these vesicles are carrying neurotransmitters. You may have heard of neurotransmitters before, things like dopamine or epinephrine or serotonin or melatonin. Those are all neurotransmitters, and they get passed from one cell to another by this process called exocytosis. And this is where a vesicle fuses with the cell membrane. This whole thing right here is a cell. I know it's hard to believe, it looks weird. Okay, but it fuses with the cell membrane, and then it essentially like vomits its contents out to another cell, which then can use those molecules. Okay, so endocytosis and exocytosis, great examples of active transport for taking in large molecules or for exporting large molecules. Okay, in terms of endocytosis, there are two types of endocytosis. Sometimes the cell will actually suck in water through the process of endocytosis. We call that pinocytosis. And then sometimes the cell will actually take in a large solid, and that's called phagocytosis. Once again, credit to Mr. Doherty for putting these strange pictures up there. That is a tiger, and his comment to me was, well, yes, that man looks like he's about to be endocytized by the tiger. But either way, endocytosis is engulfing these molecules, and ATP is needed. It's just another picture for people who want to take another look at it. You can see how endocytosis works, where the cell membrane pinches in and then the vesicle is taken into the cell. Okay, and whatever that particle is, that goes into the cell. If it's a white blood cell, maybe it's a bacteria or a virus, but other things can be endocytized as well. This is exocytosis, and again, the classic example that we tend to use. Oh, I'm sorry, my bad. This is going to be another picture of endocytosis, where the cell membrane again pinches in and brings in a molecule. Exocytosis is just going to be, again, a vesicle that's being formed, and it's going to get pushed out through the cell membrane, and it's going to get released out of the cell. Lots of times molecules can get released out of the cell and can go into your bloodstream. Okay, both of these are forms of active transport. Endocytosis is when a cell engulfs another molecule. Exocytosis is when a cell releases a molecule out of it. Both of them require ATP. Both of them are forms of active transport. So congratulations, you've made it through cell transport. Hopefully we're going to do some review activities and make sure everybody's comfortable with the material before we have any assessment. So this is Mr. Dell signing off, and hopefully I'll talk to you soon. Take care.